Hello, it's great to see everyone. Well, when I was a little girl, one of my favorite things to do with my family, my mom and my sister especially, was to go to the public library. Does anyone recognize this library? This is the Tulsa County Public Library in Broken Arrow, and this is where my sister, my mom, and I would spend a lot of time in the summer. We loved running into the library, asking the librarian, how many books can we get today? And trying to find as many as we could because we love to read so much. We would pick out books for my dad, and we would help my mom try to get some books too. I think I really like the library so much, and I think that I like to read and listen to audiobooks so much because I love stories. Stories are sometimes about the adventures of imaginary people and things that some author has dreamed up to tell us about that fictional story. Sometimes stories are nonfiction, and we get to hear about things that are true from historical features. We get to hear about things that are happening today in the world and maybe things that will happen about in the future. I just love listening to stories and reading them and hearing them in audiobooks. But stories are not just effectively told by humans. Stories are sometimes told by other things as well. Rocks are some of my favorite storytellers. Rocks are aggregates of minerals that make up the terrestrial planets and asteroids and other rocky things in our solar system. I love that rocks are such patient, kind, steadfast storytellers. They hold on to stories for thousands, millions, sometimes even billions of years. Sometimes those stories are geologic in nature and they tell us a scientific story, but sometimes they tell us a relational story. So here I want to show you some of those geologic stories. The picture on the upper left here is called Avalanche Lake, and it's at the base of a mountain range in what we know as Glacier National Monument in Montana. These rocks tell the story of a glacier that moved through the rocks and carved away this classic U-shaped glacial valley. And this is what we get to see today. These rocks tell us a geologic story about that glacier. On the upper right, there's an image of Kilauea, which is a volcano in Hawaii. Today, Kilauea is making rocks, baby rocks called basalts that will tell a story of their formation in that eruption event in that volcano. The bottom picture there, I'm hoping you recognize as the Grand Canyon. So the Grand Canyon rocks tell the story of the Colorado River running through all those rocks for millions of years to carve out that beautiful canyon system. These are one way that we get stories from rocks that tell that geologic past. Now, sometimes rocks tell stories that are more relational. One of my favorite types of stories for animals is that sometimes animals use rocks in a relational way. These are the Adelie penguins that the males will create nests out of rocks, and then they will try to get their mate by giving them one of their rocks. That's one relational way that animals have used rocks to tell a story. Humans do this all the time. We love to give each other beautiful rocks as gemstones, perhaps, or as different minerals out of love or admiration or friendship. Humans also do this a lot as we're trying to catalog, say, cultural things and religious things when we use marble, for example, or granite to carve different types of statues that we then have for centuries. So these are different ways that rocks tell a relational story. I'm a planetary scientist, and one of the things that planetary scientists like to do is use rocks to tell stories of even further back in the past than just Earth's geologic history. We like to tell the story of the formation of the solar system. These images here are the surfaces of Mercury, the moon, and my favorite asteroid, Vesta. They tell us a story just by looking at these images that these bodies were battered and hit during impact cratering events. These are long geologic stories that we see within these planetary surfaces. However, I am a cosmochemist, and so I love to study meteorites. Meteorites are rocks from space that came through the Earth's atmosphere and then landed on the ground so that we could study them and learn their stories to better tell the story of the solar system. So today, I have two different meteorites that I want to show you, and I want to tell you their story. The first meteorite has a story that's very geological and historic. This is a meteorite called Allende. Allende fell on February 8, 1969, in the Chihuahua Peninsula of Mexico. And it was an event that was noticed by a lot of people. It was also a large event. There was a lot of material that broke up in the atmosphere and then fell on the ground. So scientists got really, really excited when this happened. There were some scientists from the Smithsonian that went to Mexico within a few days of this fall, and they were able to collect some school children, probably around your age, to help them to collect meteorites in this huge strewn field of meteorites. What scientists would then learn is that Allende, and I have a piece here to show you all, is made up of chondrules. It is what we call a carbonaceous chondrite. So it's a meteorite that has carbon in it. It has some carbonate phases in it. And it is composed of these little spherules, and you might be able to see them in that picture on the right, called chondrules. These are some of the first solids that ever formed in the solar system. Scientists were also able to find out that there's these little tiny things called calcium aluminum inclusions that are the oldest things in the solar system. They are even older than chondrules. So when you're holding Allende, and when these school children were finding Allende in that strewn field, they were holding an object that was 4.567 billion years old. This is the material that was the building blocks of planets. What a geologic story Allende has. Allende also tells a really important historic story. I told you that this meteorite fell in February of 1969. The United States was gearing up for something really, really important in 1969. They were gearing up for the Apollo astronauts to land on the surface of the moon and collect rocks. So you can only imagine that NASA and other laboratories were trying to get everything prepared for all of these new lunar samples to be coming home so that scientists could study them. So what a perfect serendipitous event it was that Allende had 2 tons of material that could be collected both by scientists and students to then study and prepare for all of those Apollo samples to come in. So Allende represents not only a geologic story to tell us about the formation of the solar system, it tells us a little bit about our American history as well. The second sample that I want to show you all is a meteorite called Muscogee Mitka. Now, this is a meteorite that you may have actually witnessed coming in through the atmosphere. In the very, very early morning of January 20th, 2023, a lot of people either saw or maybe even heard a boom if you lived in around Muscogee, but maybe eastern Oklahoma. What happened was a meteorite was coming through the atmosphere. Interestingly, at this time in 2023, lots of people have doorbell cameras or security cameras, so this event was captured by a lot of different groups. I have an image here from the American Meteor Society showing one of these doorbell cameras that showed this blast of light coming through the sky and the break apart of the rock to then fall. People were really excited by this. They were able to say, this is in my backyard, maybe we could find this meteorite. And a lot of people got together to try to find it. So what happened was, very quickly, this meteorite was found, which is amazing. However, it really got sent to collectors and went out of the state of Oklahoma really fast. I heard about this meteorite falling, and I knew that this would happen. I thought it was really, really important, though, that this meteorite stay in Oklahoma. I feel as though it's a gift that we have this meteorite, and especially if it's from territory that is of the Muscogee Nation, because it landed in Muscogee, Oklahoma. I was so thankful that Oklahoma State University, where I work, was able to help me get this meteorite so that we could bring it home. So I do have it for you here today to see. One of the other things that was really important to Oklahoma State and to me was that we make sure that the Muscogee Nation had a piece of this rock because it fell onto their lands. I was so grateful that we were able to get a piece of this meteorite, and myself with some other colleagues from Oklahoma State were able to go to the Muscogee Nation and gift it to Chief Hill and the executive branch of the Muscogee Nation as a gift of friendship to say, this rock fell on your land. It's really important to us that you have it also. So this meteorite also has a really important name. The Muscogee Nation was able to decide as a committee what they wanted to name the meteorite. Meteorites are generally named after the place in which they were found. And so they were able to add their word for Muscogee and then another Muscogee word. So this meteorite is named Muscogee Mitka, which means Muscogee blessing. This meteorite does represent a really important scientific story, but it also represents a story of tribal sovereignty and friendship. And we are so grateful that that's what it stands for today. So what I want to encourage you with these two different stories is that we have stories from all sorts of rocks, from Earth rocks and also space rocks, that tell geologic stories. They tell stories of Earth history and solar system history. They also tell relational stories. So what does that mean for you? That means that I hope that next time you go and pick up a rock, you recognize it as an elder, as a storyteller, as a keeper of knowledge for thousands, millions, if not billions of years. I hope that you see a rock and that you listen to it. You ask it, what is it trying to tell you about the history of the world and the history of where we came from? Sometimes the very best storytellers don't use words at all. Thank you.